following you, Andy.
Go, go, go.
Sheriff's officers, warrant!
In Tennessee, ICE and the FBI agents moved onto a military outpost after investigators confirmed that a $128 million operation was not operating near law enforcement, but inside it. The operation targeted a secured installation after federal investigators identified controlled movement, protected transport routes, and financial flows that could only function with official clearance. What makes this case different is not just the money or the it's the location. A military facility does not become the focus of a joint ICE-FBI operation unless investigators believe the system itself has been compromised. And according to federal sources, this investigation exposed a network that relied on badges, credentials, and institutional trust to move narcotics at scale.
We're moving!
What triggered the federal response in Tennessee did not begin with the military outpost itself. Rather, it began in a courtroom thousands of miles away, where the sentencing of 12 confirmed CJNG cartel members exposed details prosecutors were not expecting to hear on the record, details that suggested that something far larger had been operating undetected. During that sentencing, federal prosecutors laid out how one defendant, Rodriguez Areola, known by the street names Taquito and Viejo, had functioned as a high-level methamphetamine broker for the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Areola coordinated deliveries from Mexico into the United States while maintaining access to cartel leadership, including CJNG boss Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho. This level of access immediately placed him beyond the category of expendable trafficker. Court-authorized wiretaps revealed that Areola and his co-defendants communicated in coded language about drug movement and pricing. Court testimony also confirmed that even after serving time in federal prison and being deported in April 2020, he returned to cartel operations within weeks. He would openly discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic was disrupting supply routes, driving up methamphetamine prices, and plotting on how to exploit border slowdowns rather than being stopped by them. As the sentencing unfolded, one critical detail surfaced through court testimonies. Areola had access to counterintelligence level information. For instance, he was caught on tape discussing the need for U.S. resident drivers during the height of the pandemic because drivers with visas could not pass through border crossings without scrutiny. And that suggested a level of situational awareness that, to prosecutors, did not come from guesswork or street rumors. By the end of the sentencing, it was clear to federal investigators that while 12 cartel members were headed to prison, the infrastructure that allowed their operation to function so smoothly had not been fully exposed.
Yeah, he's not gonna get out this door. Okay, I need you to keep your hands where I can see him crawl out to the driver's door. Do it now. I didn't do anything, sir.
Even worse, the evidence suggested that agents within the system itself may have helped ensure these traffickers moved through the cracks undetected. And once prosecutors began tracing how those gaps formed, the trail did not stop at the border or the cartel hierarchy. It pointed inward, toward the same law enforcement that was supposed to prevent the gaps in the first place. Once investigators moved past the sentencing, they started digging into how CJNG shipments consistently crossed jurisdictions without interruption. And that told them one thing: this system relied on institutional protection. And the suspects were not individuals exploiting law enforcement from the outside. They were people who operated within the same systems designed to stop trafficking, using knowledge of procedures, oversight gaps, and jurisdictional limits to ensure continuity. That realization produced a visible shift among investigators, because now, rather than just arresting rogues on the street, they were looking into individuals with rank, authority, and professional standing. Any wrong move could result in resistance, compromised evidence chains, and the risk that the case could fall apart before it reached indictment. The turning point came when surveillance and records analysis confirmed activity that could not be explained by coincidence or external influence.
So what we're doing today is called a buy-bust operation, and this gives us a second chance to recover and seize these narcotics after they've already entered the United States. We are rusing the traffickers into meeting with our undercover.
It showed coordination and logistical movement originating from inside the Tennessee military outpost itself. And this confirmation removed any remaining doubt that the operation was embedded, not merely protected. It also forced federal authorities to accept that this investigation would not end with traffickers in custody, but with the system examining its own. As federal investigators uncovered more layers, one name repeatedly surfaced as a reference point for how deeply compromised the system was: Carlos Victor Pasapera Pinot, a U.S. Border Patrol agent. On August 9, 2020, while actively employed as a Border Patrol agent, Pasapera used his marked government vehicle to drive into the desert west of the Lukeville port of entry, an area where patrol presence is routine. There, he retrieved 2 large, unassuming duffel bags, changed vehicles, and then transported the duffel bags to Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Then he parked and transferred the bags into the vehicle of a co-conspirator, relying on the same assumption of legitimacy that allowed him to move the bags up until this point. However, this assumption collapsed when the co-conspirator was stopped by law enforcement shortly after leaving the airport parking structure. A subsequent search of the duffel bags revealed the scale and severity of the operation. Authorities seized approximately 21 kilograms of cocaine, 1 kilogram of fentanyl, and 1 kilogram of heroin, quantities consistent with organized trafficking rather than isolated misconduct. Further searches uncovered an additional $311,100 in U.S. currency stored in Pasapera's safe deposit box. Confronted with the evidence, Pasapera admitted that he had accepted large cash payments in exchange for using his position as a federal agent to smuggle drugs. And this essentially confirmed investigators' growing concern that insider cooperation was important to this operation's success. To federal prosecutors, this case was especially significant. U.S. Attorney Gary Restaino stated that Pasapera had betrayed his colleagues and violated the oath entrusted to him. Essentially, he emphasized that the damage extended beyond the drugs seized or the money recovered, because cases like this do not simply represent corruption. They expose how easily institutional trust can be repurposed into a trafficking mechanism. The decision to move on the Tennessee military outpost came only after federal investigators reached a point where waiting became more dangerous than acting. Once it was clear the operation was not circling the system, but operating from inside it, federal agents knew they had to move quickly, because hesitation meant evidence could disappear, loyalties could shift, and the case could collapse under its own weight. What followed was not a dramatic raid meant for cameras. There were no flashing lights or public arrests, because this was never about spectacle. It was about control, a deliberate purge designed to lock down the outpost before fear, rumors, or internal alliances could begin destroying evidence. Federal agents moved quickly to seize cash connected to protected financial channels, narcotics tied to routes that had been treated as legitimate, encrypted devices used for internal coordination, and internal records that suddenly reframed everyday movements as part of a sustained trafficking operation. The consequences came fast and without explanation. Some personnel were detained for questioning, others were immediately suspended, and indictments were sealed to prevent interference. This sent a clear message that rank, position, or proximity to power would not shield anyone from this fallout. Inside the base, the psychological impact was immediate. Trust shattered almost overnight. Colleagues began shifting their alliances, and panic quietly spread as everyone realized that anyone could now be under scrutiny.
Here's your copy. I circled the date on the back. On my copy, I'm also going to need your right fingerprint.
No, ma'am.
You don't have, since you don't have proof of ID?
That's my property.
Okay, so you're refusing to sign this ticket?
Yes, ma'am.
What this case ultimately exposed was not a single corrupt agent, a single compromised outpost, or even a single cartel pipeline, but a structural failure. The most unsettling conclusion federal investigators reached was that the operation did not succeed by breaking into protected systems, but by functioning comfortably inside supposedly protected systems. In the aftermath of the raid, investigators as officials limited their statements and declined to elaborate on the scope of the investigation. And that silence confirmed the depth of the problem. Because if a drug operation could function inside a military outpost, protected by law enforcement access and institutional trust, where else are we not allowed to look? Meanwhile, what federal officials have made clear, without saying it outright, is that this investigation did not conclude when agents secured the outpost or when evidence was seized. Because cases involving systemic abuse rarely end cleanly, they linger, expand, and quietly reshape how future oversight is conducted, if it is conducted at all. The reality exposed here is uncomfortable for a reason. This operation survived by allowing the system to trust it, moving through channels designed to never question themselves, and lasting long enough that its existence felt routine to the people who benefited from it. That is why there have been no sweeping public disclosures, no full accounting of how many officials were examined, and no definitive statements about where the investigation stops. Because transparency becomes dangerous when it threatens the credibility of entire institutions rather than individual offenders. So, what this case really revealed wasn't the dollar amount, the cartel name, or even the outpost itself, but the realization that the most serious vulnerabilities are not found at the border or on the street. They exist wherever authority goes unchecked long enough to stop asking who is watching it. So the question left hanging isn't whether this will happen again, it's where investigators are still not allowed to look, and how much more is already moving quietly through systems designed to stop it.